Hello and welcome to Stateline. I'm Kathy Boland. Now to a statistic you might find shocking. On any given night in Victoria, there are 13,000 women looking for somewhere to sleep. Many are fleeing domestic violence or other personal crises. Some are simply victims of the housing shortfall. But with homeless services traditionally geared to single men or young people, there are all too few services for these women in need. Mary McDonald reports.
It was just a horror story. It was a revolving door of hell every day, and it was the same thing. All it was about get drugs, take the drugs, get more drugs, take more drugs. And in the middle of it, gambling and with money.
A few years ago, Trish Steinthal found herself homeless and destitute as a drug and gambling addiction took hold. Paranoid and psychotic, she ended up living out of her car.
It was horribly lonely. I had the dog with me. I was going crazy by the day, sitting talking to the dog. Anybody listening to me or looking at me would have thought that woman's right off her head, and I was. And I was very, very scared.
The 42-year-old single mother once worked full-time for the federal government. Things began to unravel when she took a redundancy package and became involved in a destructive relationship.
Before I knew it, I started using drugs and gambling, and it all just took off, and it became very serious very quickly. And I lost the house, I lost my son. I lost everything I had basically.
Trish Steinthal's story isn't unusual. Domestic violence and drugs are often the reasons women end up homeless. But now the lack of affordable housing is having an impact.
Single women over 25, so 25 to 55, which are this sort of older end, has increased almost 100% over the last 4 years.
Women like Trish Steinthal end up relying on services like the Regina Coeli community in North Melbourne. It's run by the Sisters of Mercy, who help disadvantaged women and children around the world.
They're all damaged and vulnerable in various ways. Most of the women, that's how they get here, because they are vulnerable and haven't known where they were going to be next, where they would live, where their next bed was coming from.
The Regina Coeli community provides medium to long-term residential accommodation for single homeless women over the age of 25.
In addition to that, we provide an outreach service for women who have been part of the community but have moved on. So we provide support when the woman first moves into her own accommodation, and then ongoing support.
The community is really good. We support each other through Women to Women. We've all got our different stories. But it's definitely a supportive, caring environment. And it grows from there.
But there aren't many centres like it in Melbourne.
Most of the services are for single men. So these women often have to use the same services that single men are using, and they are often less than satisfactory. We're talking about the private rooming house sector, where single women, are very unsafe.
The shortage of services is compounded by perception in the general community that only men become homeless.
We don't see women as being homeless, and I don't think that homeless women are acceptable in our society. And so we fail to pick up the women who are in a really crisis situation, certainly from a societal perspective. We don't see it, and we don't want to see it, I don't think.
The plight of disadvantaged women has taken centre stage this week as the Sisters of Mercy celebrate 150 years of service in Melbourne.
I think the common themes that you see, whether you're in a refugee camp or on the streets of New York or today in the streets of Melbourne, it's the disempowerment and the loneliness and the fear of abandonment, and people just they're no longer in control of their own lives, and they're just dependent on, charity and people to reach out and to mend their brokenness.
Sister Deirdre Mullen represents the interests of the Sisters of Mercy at the United Nations in New York and flew into Melbourne for the 150th anniversary. She met women who are part of the Regina Coeli community and was impressed with what she saw.
I felt the women were in a safe space. You know, they felt free to talk to us. It's as good as you're going to get anywhere in the world.
There's always a long way to go. You can always do more. You can always be a bit more challenging. Homelessness is not a popular subject, and it's not something that, you know, if you bring people to the city, you talk about.
Those in the welfare sector say the cycle of homelessness among women will continue to worsen unless there's more funding for medium to long-term accommodation.
Increasingly, we need to respond with what we would call medium to long-term options of support and accommodation packages. So we put together the right type of accommodation with the right level of support so that people can more quickly get on with their lives.
Trish Steinthal knows only too well just how valuable the right kind of support can be.
I don't think I'd ever be alive if I hadn't have turned up here, and that's not being over dramatic. If I hadn't have found my way here, God knows, I really hate to think what would have happened to me.
Mary McDonald with that report. And that brings us to the end of Stateline for this week. Thanks for joining us. You can read transcripts from the program or send us an email via our website. And we'll be back next Friday after the news. See you then.
What a beautiful day. What a beautiful, what a beautiful